Commander Jake Morrison sat in his office at the Terran Defense Force headquarters, staring at the holographic message that had just arrived from space. The blue light flickered as he read the words again, not quite believing what he was seeing. After 3 years of being part of the Galactic Coalition, Earth was finally getting some real attention from the aliens. The message came from Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian High Command. Jake had met him once before at a diplomatic gathering on the moon base. The ambassador was tall, made of what looked like living crystal, and could turn invisible whenever he wanted. His people had been masters of stealth technology for thousands of years. "Amy, come look at this," Jake called to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Amy Carter. She walked over from her desk, her boots clicking on the metal floor. Amy was young, but smart, one of the best tactical officers Earth had ever produced. She had short brown hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. Amy read the message over Jake's shoulder. "Sir, they want to observe our camouflage methods. It says here that Coalition intelligence reports suggest humans have an unusual ability to blend with natural environments using only basic materials." Jake leaned back in his chair and laughed. "Amy, these beings have technology that can bend light around objects. They can make themselves completely invisible with the push of a button. Some of them can phase through solid matter like it's not even there. And they want to watch us play in the mud? I think they're talking about field camouflage, sir." "You?" "No, face paint, hiding in bush, that sort of thing," Amy said, trying not to smile. Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the sprawling military base with its advanced aircraft and energy weapons. Earth had come a long way in 3 years of alien contact, but compared to the other species in the Coalition, humans were still considered primitive. "Amy, do you know what the Mokari can do?" "They can read minds from 3 miles away." "The Vorthan have cybernetic implants that let them see in every spectrum of light at once. The Ethereal Collective can predict the future with mathematical certainty. And all of them want to watch us roll around in dirt." Amy pulled up her tablet and started reading through the Coalition files. "Sir, according to this report, 17 different species have tried to understand human stealth techniques. They all failed to replicate our methods. The Zephyrians think we might have some kind of genetic ability they don't understand." Jake turned back from the window. "Genetic ability? Amy, my grandfather could disappear into a forest with nothing but a hunting knife and some mud. It's not genetic, it's just something humans learn to do." The message continued with details about the upcoming demonstration. The Coalition was sending a full observation team to Earth. 7 different species would be represented, each bringing their most advanced detection equipment. They wanted to see human camouflage in action. "Sir, look at this list," Amy said, pointing to her tablet. "They're sending their best military analyst. Commander Threx of the Vorthan Collective, Dr. Zara Fenn from the Mokari Research Institute, and at least 12 others. These aren't just casual observers, they're treating this like a major scientific study." Jake sat back down and started going through the personnel files. "If they want to see human camouflage, we need to give them the best we have. Who's our top field reconnaissance specialist?" "Sergeant Bobby Miller, sir. He's been with the Forest Recon Unit for 8 years. His record shows successful infiltrations in every type of terrain on Earth. During the Australian conflict, he stayed hidden behind enemy lines for 3 weeks using nothing but local materials." Jake pulled up Miller's file. The photo showed a man in his 30s with dark hair and calm eyes. His record was impressive. Multiple commendations for stealth operations, expert marksman, survival training instructor. But what caught Jake's attention was a note at the bottom of the file. It says here that Miller once hid from a thermal imaging satellite for 6 hours using only tree branches and mud. The search team walked right past him twice. Amy nodded. "Sir, Miller has an unusual talent. His instructors say he doesn't just hide in the environment, he becomes part of it. Other soldiers follow techniques and procedures. Miller seems to think like the forest itself." Jake closed the file and looked at Amy. "Set up a meeting with Miller and contact Dr. Kelvin Ross at the Xenobiology Department. If we're going to demonstrate human abilities to 7 alien species, we need someone who understands how their minds work. 3 days later, the Coalition observation vessel appeared in Earth's orbit. The ship was massive, over 2 miles long, and seemed to be made of different materials fused together. Each section belonged to a different species, creating a patchwork of alien architecture floating in space. Jake stood on the landing pad at the Colorado test site, watching as the alien representatives arrived. Some materialized in flashes of light, others stepped through glowing portals, and a few simply appeared without any visible means of transportation. Dr. Ross stood beside him, nervously adjusting his equipment. "Commander, I've studied these species for 2 years, but I've never seen them all together like this. The Zephyrians are made of living crystal and can manipulate light itself. The Mokari communicate through telepathy and can sense emotions from great distances. The Vorthan are part machine and can process information faster than our computers." Jake watched as Ambassador Veltar approached. The alien's crystalline form caught the sunlight and scattered it in rainbow patterns. "Dr. Ross, are you certain this demonstration will prove effective against our sensor arrays?" "That's precisely the point, Ambassador," Ross replied, his voice steadier than Jake had expected. "Sometimes the most primitive approaches can be the most effective." Sergeant Miller emerged from the nearby forest, wearing standard military fatigues but carrying minimal equipment. He had a combat knife on his belt and a small pouch of basic supplies. Nothing that would register as advanced technology to the alien observers. Commander Threx of the Vorthan Collective studied Miller with his cybernetic implants. Jake could see the alien's mechanical eye focusing and refocusing as it recorded data. "The human appears to be unarmed and technologically primitive. This should be simple to track." Miller walked over to Jake and saluted. "Sir, I'm ready to begin the demonstration." Jake nodded. "Miller, these beings have technology we can barely understand. They can see heat signatures, read brainwaves, and detect movement at the molecular level. Your job is to hide from all of that using nothing but what you can find in the forest." Miller glanced at the assembled aliens, then back at Jake. "Sir, with respect, technology is just another tool. The forest has been hiding things long before any of us invented sensors." Dr. Fenn of the Mokari stepped forward. Her species looked like tall, thin humans with silver skin and large eyes. "Sergeant Miller, my people can detect conscious thought patterns from significant distances." "How do you intend to hide your mind?" Miller smiled. "Ma'am, I'm not going to hide my mind. I'm going to change what it's thinking about." The demonstration area was a section of dense Colorado forest, about 2 square miles of varied terrain. There were rocky outcroppings, dense undergrowth, fallen logs, and a small stream running through the middle. To human eyes, it looked like typical wilderness. To the alien observers, it was a simple environment with limited hiding places. Miller studied the area for a few minutes, then looked back at the group. "I'll need about an hour to prepare. When I give the signal, you can begin trying to find me." As Miller disappeared into the trees, the aliens began setting up their equipment. Energy scanners, probability calculators, telepathic amplifiers, and devices Jake couldn't even identify. They were bringing the full power of advanced civilization to bear on finding one human soldier. Jake watched them work and felt a strange sense of pride. These beings had mastered faster-than-light travel, conquered disease and aging, and built technologies that seemed like magic. But they were about to learn something new from a species they considered primitive. "Amy," Jake said quietly, "I think we're about to surprise some very smart aliens." 1 hour later, Miller emerged from the forest and walked back to the group of waiting aliens. He looked exactly the same as when he had left, still wearing his standard military uniform, still carrying only basic equipment. The alien observers had spent the time setting up their advanced detection systems around the demonstration area. Commander Threx had positioned 12 micro-drones throughout the forest, each one equipped with sensors that could detect movement down to the cellular level. The drones floated silently between the trees, their blue scanning beams cutting through the shadows. Dr. Fenn had activated her telepathic amplifiers, devices that looked like silver headbands with glowing crystals. Her fellow Mokari researchers formed a circle around the forest perimeter, their large eyes closed in concentration as they prepared to scan for human thoughts. Ambassador Veltar stood near a large crystalline structure that hummed with energy. The device could bend light in ways that defied human understanding, creating detailed maps of everything within a 5-mile radius. His people had used similar technology to track enemy fleets across entire star systems. "Sergeant Miller," Dr. Ross called out, "are you ready to begin?" Miller nodded and looked around at the assembled aliens. "Before I start, I want to make sure everyone understands the rules. I'm going to hide somewhere in this forest using only materials I can find here. No technology, no weapons, no equipment except what nature provides. Your job is to find me." The ethereal collective representative, a being of pure energy contained within a translucent suit, spoke in a voice like wind chimes. "Human, our probability matrices have calculated 847 possible hiding locations within this terrain. Our quantum sensors can detect disturbances in space-time itself. This exercise will conclude quickly." Miller smiled. "Maybe it will. But I've got a few tricks you might not expect." Jake watched from the observation area as Miller walked back into the forest. The aliens immediately activated their scanning equipment, filling the air with humming energy and strange lights. Their confidence was obvious. These beings had hunted criminals across galaxies and tracked enemy ships through dimensions that humans couldn't even imagine. "Amy," Jake said quietly, "I almost feel sorry for them." Lieutenant Carter looked at the display screens showing the aliens' sensor readings. "Sir, they're getting clear readings on every animal in the forest. Squirrels, birds, insects, even bacteria in the soil. If Miller is in there, their equipment should spot him immediately." The first few minutes passed quietly. The aliens monitored their instruments, occasionally adjusting settings or repositioning sensors. Their body language suggested they were waiting for Miller to make a mistake, to move in a way that would trigger their detection systems. Dr. Fenn suddenly straightened, her silver skin shimmering with concentration. "On detecting human thought patterns. Strong emotional signatures. The subject appears to be ... calm, unusually calm for someone attempting to hide." Commander Threx checked his drone feeds, confirmed. "Thermal imaging shows elevated activity in Sector 7, moving to investigate." The group of aliens moved through the forest with surprising grace despite their advanced equipment. Their scanning devices swept back and forth, painting the trees with various colors of light. They moved like a well-trained hunting party, each species using their particular strengths to track their prey. Jake and Amy followed at a distance, along with Dr. Ross and a small team of human observers. They could see the aliens' equipment working perfectly, detecting every living thing in the forest with incredible precision. "There," Ambassador Veltar announced, pointing to a cluster of fallen logs near the stream. "The crystalline sensors indicate a human-sized mass in that location. Heat signature matches the target profile." The aliens surrounded the area, their weapons and capture devices ready. Commander Threx sent his drones in first, their scanners confirming the presence of a human-sized object hiding behind the logs. "Sergeant Miller," Dr. Fenn called out, "we have located you. Please emerge from your hiding place." Nothing happened. The logs remained still, the forest quiet except for the humming of alien technology. "Perhaps he cannot hear us," suggested one of the Vorthan researchers. "Our sensors clearly show a human presence in that location." Commander Threx approached the logs carefully, his cybernetic implants scanning for any signs of movement. He reached the hiding spot and looked behind the fallen trees. His mechanical eye whirred as it focused on what he found there. "This is not the human," he announced, his voice carrying confusion that surprised everyone. "This is a deer. A local animal species?" The aliens gathered around the location, their instruments all confirming the same thing. They had tracked a deer with absolute precision, following its heat signature and biological markers as if it were their human target. "Impossible," Dr. Fenn said, her telepathic sensors sweeping the area again. I was reading human thought patterns from this exact location. I could sense his emotions, his intentions. Jake stepped forward, trying to hide his growing amusement. Doctor, are you certain you were reading human thoughts? Or could you have been reading something else? Dr. Fenn's large eyes narrowed as she considered the question. The emotional patterns were consistent with human psychology. Calm, focused, slightly amused, but... She paused, her sensors sweeping wider. The thoughts were very simple. Basic survival instincts and environmental awareness. Amy looked at Jake with understanding. Sir, I think Miller is playing with their minds. Somehow he's making them think animal thoughts are human thoughts. The aliens spent the next 20 minutes recalibrating their equipment, convinced that some form of interference was affecting their readings. They found 3 more false positives, tracking down a raccoon, a large bird, and at one point, a particularly active cluster of insects. This is highly irregular, Ambassador Veltar announced, his crystalline form pulsing with frustration. Our sensors are functioning perfectly, yet we cannot locate a single human in this limited area. Dr. Ross stepped forward, his tablet showing readings from the human monitoring equipment. Honored observers, I can confirm that Sergeant Miller is indeed somewhere in this forest. Our basic thermal imaging detected him entering the area, but we haven't seen him leave. Commander Threx deployed additional drones, filling the forest with mechanical observers. If the human is present, we will find him. No organic being can hide from this level of technological surveillance. The search continued for another hour. The aliens found and cataloged every living creature in the forest, from the largest deer to the smallest beetle. Their equipment worked flawlessly, their coordination was perfect, and their determination was absolute, but they found no sign of Sergeant Miller. This is becoming embarrassing, Jake heard one of the Vorthan researchers mutter to his companion. We're using technology that can track quantum fluctuations, and we cannot find one primitive human. Dr. Fenn was now moving through the forest in a systematic pattern, her telepathic abilities focused to maximum sensitivity. I continue to detect human thought patterns, she reported. But they're everywhere. I'm reading human consciousness from dozens of different locations simultaneously. The ethereal collective representative floated above the trees, its energy form pulsing with calculations. Our probability matrices have now identified 3,247 possible hiding locations. The human appears to be violating several laws of physics. Jake watched the aliens' growing frustration with satisfaction. These beings had conquered star systems with their technology, but they were being outwitted by a single human using nothing but natural materials. Amy, he said quietly, I think we're about to witness something that will change how the galaxy thinks about humanity. The search entered its 3rd hour. The aliens had now scanned every square foot of the forest multiple times, their instruments, detecting everything from soil composition to atmospheric pressure. They had found 47 different animal species, 127 varieties of plants, and 1,847 different types of insects. But Sergeant Bobby Miller remained invisible, hidden somewhere in plain sight using nothing but mud and leaves, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal himself and teach the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy a lesson they would never forget. While the aliens searched frantically with their advanced equipment, Sergeant Miller was exactly where he had said he would be. He was hiding in the forest, using nothing but natural materials, completely invisible to the most sophisticated detection. Technology in the galaxy, but Miller was not simply hiding behind a tree or under a pile of leaves. What he had done in that first hour was far more complex and impressive than any of the aliens could have imagined. Miller had begun by studying the forest like a scientist. He walked slowly through the trees, touching the bark, examining the soil, watching how the light fell through the leaves. He looked at which plants grew where, how the water moved in the stream, and where the animals made their homes. To anyone watching, it might have looked like Miller was just taking a walk. But he was actually learning the forest's language, understanding its rhythms and patterns. He was figuring out how to become part of it. The first thing Miller did was change his smell. He rolled in the dirt near the stream, covering himself with mud that carried the scent of the forest floor. Then he found a patch of wild mint and crushed the leaves against his skin. He rubbed pine sap on his hands and clothes and even chewed on some bitter bark to change his breath. By the time he was finished, Miller smelled like the forest itself. Any animal that caught his scent would think he belonged there. More importantly, the alien's chemical sensors would read him as part of the natural environment. Next, Miller worked on his appearance. He collected specific types of mud, not just any dirt, but clay that matched the exact color of the tree bark around him. He mixed it with water and dead leaves, creating a paste that would help him blend with his surroundings. Miller applied the mud carefully, breaking up the human shape that the aliens would be looking for. He covered his face, hands, and any exposed skin, but he didn't just slap it on randomly. He studied how shadows fell on the trees and rocks, then painted those same shadow patterns on his body, but changing his smell and appearance was only the beginning. Miller also had to think about heat. The aliens' thermal sensors could detect body temperature from great distances. So Miller did something that surprised even his human observers. He lowered his body temperature. Miller had learned this technique during survival training in the Arctic. By controlling his breathing and slowing his heart rate, he could reduce his body's heat output. It wasn't comfortable and it took great concentration, but it made him nearly invisible to thermal imaging. Then came the most important part. Miller had to change how he moved. He abandoned every habit of human movement he had ever learned. Instead of walking upright, he moved like the animals around him. When he needed to cross an open area, he crawled slowly like a snake. When he moved through thick brush, he flowed like water finding its way downhill. Miller timed his movements with the wind. When a breeze rustled the leaves, he moved with them. When the wind stopped, he became perfectly still. He learned to move in harmony with the forest's natural rhythm. He also learned to think differently. Miller emptied his mind of human thoughts and concerns. Instead, he focused on basic sensory input. The feel of dirt under his hands, the sound of water in the stream, the smell of growing plants. He became part of the forest consciousness. This was what confused Dr. Fenn's telepathic abilities. She was reading Miller's thoughts, but his thoughts had become so simple and natural that they seemed like animal instincts rather than human intelligence. Miller chose his hiding spot carefully. It wasn't a cave or a hollow log where the aliens might expect to find someone. Instead, he positioned himself in the most obvious place possible, right in the middle of a game trail where animals frequently passed. He lay down next to a fallen log, not behind it where someone might look, but beside it as if he were just another piece of fallen wood. He arranged branches and leaves over his body, but not in a way that looked artificial. Every piece of camouflage was placed to match the natural pattern of debris around the log. Then Miller did the hardest thing of all. He became perfectly still, not just motionless, but still in a way that few humans ever achieve. He slowed his breathing until it was barely noticeable. He relaxed every muscle in his body. He even controlled his eye movements, keeping his gaze fixed and unfocused like a sleeping animal. When the alien sensors swept over him, they detected exactly what Miller wanted them to find. A fallen log, some scattered debris, and the normal biological activity of forest soil. His heat signature matched the temperature of decomposing wood. His chemical signature matched the scent of the forest floor. Most importantly, his electromagnetic signature was almost zero. Miller had learned to quiet his nervous system so completely that his brain activity barely registered on the aliens' most sensitive instruments. The aliens walked past Miller dozens of times during their search. Commander Threx's drones flew directly overhead. Dr. Fenn's telepathic scans passed right through his hiding spot. Ambassador Veltar's light-bending sensors examined every inch of the area around the fallen log. But they found nothing. Because Miller had convinced their instruments that he was nothing worth finding. At one point, a curious deer wandered over to investigate the log where Miller was hiding. The animal sniffed around for a few seconds, then lay down next to what it thought was just another part of the forest floor. The deer actually used Miller as a backrest for nearly 10 minutes before wandering away. The aliens saw this happen on their sensors. They recorded a deer resting against a log, exhibiting normal animal behavior. It never occurred to them that the log was actually a human being. Jake watched the search from the observation area, amazed by what he was seeing. The aliens had technology that could track a single atom across space, but they couldn't find a man lying 20 feet away from them. "Amy," Jake whispered, "do you see what Miller is doing? He's not just hiding from their sensors. He's making their sensors work against them." Amy nodded, studying the alien equipment displays. "Sir, their instruments are working perfectly. They're detecting exactly what Miller wants them to detect. He's turned their own technology into his camouflage." Dr. Ross was taking notes frantically, trying to record everything he observed. "This is incredible," he muttered. "Miller isn't using any technology at all, but he's manipulating theirs. He's made himself invisible by becoming visible as something else." The aliens continued their search with growing frustration. They had now spent 3 hours looking for one human in a small patch of forest. Their equipment had functioned flawlessly, their coordination had been perfect, and their determination was absolute, but Sergeant Bobby Miller remained hidden, lying motionless next to a fallen log, his body temperature matching the surrounding wood, his breathing synchronized with the movement of the forest canopy above. He had become part of the forest itself, invisible not because he couldn't be seen, but because he had convinced the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy that he was something not worth seeing, and he was enjoying every minute of it. 4 hours had passed since Miller disappeared into the forest, and the aliens were becoming desperate. What had started as a simple demonstration was turning into the most embarrassing moment in Coalition military history. 7 of the galaxies. Most advanced species were being outsmarted by one human using dirt and leaves. Commander Threx called for additional equipment from the observation ship in orbit. Within minutes, microscopic scanning drones began raining down from the sky like silver dust. Each drone was smaller than a grain of sand, but equipped with sensors that could detect DNA fragments floating in the air. "If the human has been in this forest, these microscanners will find traces of his genetic material," Threx announced. His cybernetic implants, glowing brighter as he processed data from thousands of tiny sensors. Dr. Fenn had given up trying to read Miller's thoughts directly. Instead, she was now scanning for the absence of thoughts, looking for blank spots in the forest's mental activity that might indicate where a human was trying to hide his consciousness. "I can sense every living mind in this forest," she reported to the other aliens. "Squirrels thinking about nuts, birds thinking about nests, insects thinking about food. But somewhere in this pattern, there should be a human mind thinking about hiding, and I cannot find it." Ambassador Veltar had activated his people's most advanced detection system, a device that could trace the quantum disturbances left by any living being. The crystalline scanner created a 3-dimensional map of every footstep, every breath, every heartbeat that had occurred in the forest over the past 6 hours. "Fascinating," Veltar said, studying the quantum traces. "I can see exactly where the human entered the forest. His path is clear for the first several minutes. He walked to the stream, then to that cluster of pine trees, then toward the fallen logs. But after that, his trail simply vanishes." The ethereal collective had deployed probability analysis devices throughout the forest. These machines could calculate the likelihood of finding a human in any given location based on terrain, cover, and tactical advantage. They had identified every possible hiding spot and ranked them by probability. "According to our calculations," the energy being announced, "the human should be in one of 17 high-probability locations. We have now searched all 17 locations multiple times. Either our mathematics are wrong, or the human is violating the laws of physics." Jake watched from the observation area as more alien technology arrived from orbit. Gravitational sensors that could detect the weight of a butterfly landing on a leaf. Atmospheric analyzers that could identify individual molecules of human breath. Temporal scanners that could see backward through time to track Miller's movements. "Sir," Amy said quietly, "they're bringing down equipment worth more than our entire planetary defense budget. All to find one soldier hiding in the woods. Dr. Ross was documenting everything, his tablet recording the aliens' growing frustration. "This is unprecedented," he whispered. "These species have never failed to find a target before. Their technology has always been absolute." The aliens decided to try a different approach. Instead of searching for Miller directly, they would force him to reveal himself. Commander Threx activated sonic disruptors that filled the forest with high-frequency sounds designed to cause discomfort in human hearing. Miller didn't move. Dr. Fenn tried telepathic pressure, sending waves of mental static that should have disrupted any human's ability to concentrate. Miller remained perfectly still. The Vorthan team released chemical markers into the air, substances that would react with human skin and create visible traces even through camouflage. Nothing happened. "This is impossible," Commander Threx said, his mechanical eye scanning the forest for the 100th time. "We have used every detection method known to galactic science. The human cannot simply have vanished." Ambassador Veltar was studying his quantum scanner readings with growing confusion. "The traces show that the human definitely entered this forest. The quantum disturbances are clear and unmistakable. But they lead to that area near the fallen logs, and then they stop completely. What if he left the forest?" suggested one of the Mokari researchers. "Perhaps he exited through an area we weren't monitoring." Dr. Fenn shook her head. "Impossible. I have been maintaining a telepathic perimeter around the entire area. No human consciousness has crossed the boundary." The aliens gathered near the fallen logs where Miller's trail had vanished. This was the last place their instruments had detected any sign of him. They studied the area with increasing intensity, bringing more and more sophisticated equipment to bear on a simple pile of wood and debris. "There must be underground tunnels," Commander Threx declared. "The human has dug beneath the forest floor." Ground-penetrating radar confirmed that the soil was undisturbed. "No tunnels, no caves, no hidden chambers." "Perhaps he climbed into the trees," suggested the ethereal being. Gravitational sensors showed no human-sized mass in any of the branches above. "Could he have camouflaged himself as a rock?" asked a Vorthan engineer. Molecular scanners confirmed that all the rocks in the area were indeed rocks, made of stone and mineral deposits with no organic components. The aliens were running out of explanations. They had used technology that could track enemy fleets across star systems, and they couldn't find one human in a small forest. "Wait," Dr. Fenn said suddenly, her telepathic sensors focused on the fallen log. "I'm detecting something strange. There are thought patterns coming from this log, but they're not quite right." The aliens gathered around the log, their instruments humming with activity. Commander Threx's scanners showed that it was definitely made of wood. Ambassador Veltar's quantum sensors confirmed that it had been lying there for months slowly, decomposing into the forest floor. "The thoughts are very simple," Dr. Fenn continued. "Basic awareness, environmental sensitivity, but no complex reasoning. It's as if this log is thinking like a very simple animal." Amy grabbed Jake's arm. "Sir, I think they're finally figuring it out." Jake watched as the aliens focused all their attention on the fallen log. Their instruments were working perfectly, telling them exactly what Miller wanted them to know. The log was made of wood, had been there for months, and was slowly becoming part of the forest floor. "The molecular composition is definitely organic wood fiber," Commander Threx reported. "Carbon dating suggests it fell during the spring season. No artificial materials detected. The quantum signature matches natural decomposition," Ambassador Veltar added. "This log has been here long enough to become part of the forest ecosystem." Dr. Fenn was frowning, her telepathic abilities focused more intensely than ever before. "The thought patterns are so simple, almost primitive. But there's something familiar about them, something almost ... human." The aliens spent another hour studying the log from every possible angle. They took samples of the bark, analyzed the soil around it, and even counted the insects living in its decaying wood. Everything confirmed that it was exactly what it appeared to be, a fallen tree slowly returning to the earth, but Dr. Fenn couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The thoughts coming from the log were too organized, too aware. Even simple animals had more complex mental patterns than what she was detecting. "There's something here," she announced to the other aliens. "I can't explain it, but this log is thinking in a way that logs shouldn't think." Commander Threx deployed his most sensitive scanners directly onto the log's surface. All readings confirm natural wood composition. "If there's something here, it's hidden beyond our ability to detect." The search had now lasted over 4 hours. The aliens had used technology worth billions of credits, deployed equipment that could analyze matter at the subatomic level, and brought the combined expertise of 7 different species to bear on finding one human soldier, and they had completely failed. Miller lay perfectly still beneath his camouflage of mud and leaves, listening to the aliens discuss their failure just inches away from his hidden position. He had been motionless for so long that small insects were beginning to build nests in the debris covering his body. He was no longer just hiding in the forest. He had become part of it so completely that even the most advanced technology in the galaxy couldn't tell the difference between Sergeant Bobby, Miller, and a rotting log, and he was starting to think it was time to surprise them. Miller decided it was time to end the demonstration. He had been lying motionless for over 4 hours, and the aliens were starting to give up their search. But before he revealed himself, he wanted to teach them one final lesson about human abilities. Very slowly, Miller began to move. Not the sudden movement of someone jumping up from hiding, but the gradual shift of someone who had never been hiding at all. He moved like he was waking up from a long sleep, like a piece of the forest that was stretching after a quiet afternoon. The alien sensors detected the movement immediately, but their instruments interpreted it as natural settling. Logs shifted position all the time as they decomposed. Soil moved as insects burrowed through it. The forest was always in motion, and Miller's movement seemed like just another part of that natural process. Dr. Fenn was the first to notice something unusual. Her telepathic abilities detected a change in the thought patterns coming from the fallen log. The simple, animal-like awareness was becoming more complex, more organized, more human. "Something is happening," she announced to the other aliens. "The mental activity near the log is increasing. It's becoming more sophisticated." Commander Threx turned his scanners toward the log, but his instruments still showed nothing unusual. Would fiber, decomposing organic matter, normal forest debris? But Dr. Fenn was right. Something was definitely changing. Miller continued his slow emergence. Mud and leaves began falling away from his body as he moved, but he made sure it looked natural, like debris shifting in the wind, while small animals disturbing the surface of the log. Ambassador Veltar's quantum sensors were showing strange readings. The molecular structure near the log was changing, reorganizing itself in ways that didn't match normal decomposition patterns. But the changes were so gradual that his equipment kept classifying them as natural variations. "The log appears to be changing," Veltar reported, his crystalline form pulsing with confusion. "But our sensors indicate that this is normal organic decay." Miller smiled beneath his camouflage. Even as he moved, even as he began to reveal himself, the aliens' own technology was working against them. Their instruments were so sophisticated that they tried to explain everything they detected, and Miller had trained them to see him as part of the forest. Slowly, very slowly, Miller raised his head. Mud fell from his face, revealing human features beneath the camouflage. But he moved so naturally, so much like a part of the environment, that the aliens' motion detectors didn't register it as anything significant. Dr. Fenn's eyes went wide. She was staring directly at the log, watching as what she had thought was wood and debris began to take on human shape. But her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. Her telepathic abilities told her there was human consciousness in that location, but her eyes still saw mostly forest materials. "That's not a log," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Commander Threx looked where she was pointing. His cybernetic eye focused and refocused, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. His scanner still showed organic wood composition, but now there were patches that looked almost like human skin. Miller sat up completely. becoming fully visible for the first time in 4 hours. Mud and leaves cascaded off his body, revealing the human soldier who had been hiding in plain sight all along. But even now, covered in forest debris, he looked more like a natural part of the environment than like an invading presence. The silence that followed was complete. 7 different alien species, representatives of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, stared at a human who had just materialized from what they had thought was a fallen log. "Impossible," Commander Threx said, his mechanical voice, carrying a note of something that might have been awe. "Our sensors showed that location contained only decomposing wood matter." Miller stood up and began brushing mud from his clothes. "Your sensors were right," he said calmly. "I was decomposing wood matter. At least, that's what I convinced them I was." Ambassador Veltar-S quantum scanners were now showing massive disturbances as Miller's true molecular structure became apparent. But the readings made no sense. According to the instruments, a human being had just spontaneously generated from a pile of forest debris. "How long were you there?" asked the ethereal collective representative, its energy form flickering with confusion. "About 4 hours and 23 minutes, Miller replied, checking a watch that was so covered in mud it looked like tree bark. "You walked past me 17 times? One of your drones actually landed on my back for about 5 minutes. Dr. Fenn was studying Miller with her telepathic abilities, trying to understand what had happened. "Your thoughts?" she said slowly. "They were so simple, like an animal or even like a plant." "How did you make your mind think that way?" Miller smiled, still picking leaves out of his hair. "I didn't make my mind think differently. I just stopped thinking like a human and started thinking like the forest. When you're part of something, you think like that something." Commander Threx was running diagnostic tests on all his equipment, convinced that something must have malfunctioned. But every system showed normal operation. His sensors had worked perfectly. They had detected exactly what Miller had wanted them to detect. "You were right there," Threx said, his cybernetic implants whirring as they processed the impossible. "Data. Our instruments scanned that location hundreds of times. You should have been detected." "I was detected," Miller explained patiently. "Your sensors found me every time they looked. They just thought I was part of the log." Jake and Amy approached from the observation area, both trying not to smile too obviously at the aliens' confusion. Dr. Ross was frantically taking notes, recording everything for what would become the most important xenological study in human history. "Honored observers," Dr. Ross said, "what you've witnessed today demonstrates a fundamental difference in how humans approach problems. We don't always try to overpower our challenges with superior technology." Miller nodded toward the alien sophisticated equipment. "All of your instruments worked perfectly. They detected my heat signature, my chemical composition, my molecular structure, but I convinced them that those readings meant something different than what they actually were." Ambassador Valtara's crystalline form was pulsing rapidly as he processed this information. "You're suggesting that deception can be more effective than invisibility?" "I'm suggesting that sometimes the best way to hide is to be seen as something that doesn't matter," Miller replied. "Your technology is amazing, but it depends on interpretation. I just changed how your instruments interpreted what they were seeing." The aliens spent the next hour questioning Miller about his techniques. They wanted to understand how he had controlled his body temperature, how he had modified his scent, how he had managed to think like the forest itself. But the more Miller explained, the more confused they became. Everything he had done was simple, basic, using no technology more advanced than mud and leaves. Yet he had defeated detection systems that could track individual atoms across space. "This changes everything," Dr. Fenn said finally. "We've been assuming that advancement always means more sophisticated technology. But you've shown us that sometimes the most primitive approach can be the most effective." Commander Threx was studying his sensor readings from the demonstration, trying to understand how he had been fooled so completely. "Our military academies will need to revise their entire curriculum on detection and stealth." Miller looked around at the assembled aliens. These beings who had mastered faster-than-light travel and conquered the mysteries of the universe. "The thing is," he said quietly, "this isn't even our best camouflage technique. We've got soldiers who can hide for weeks at a time using nothing but what they find in the environment." The silence that followed was even more profound than before. As the alien representatives returned to their ships to write reports that would reshape coalition military doctrine, they carried with them a new understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. Sometimes the most advanced civilizations had the most to learn from those who remembered how to get dirty. Miller sat by the stream, washing mud from his face and watching alien spacecraft disappear into the stars. He had just taught the galaxy that human ingenuity wasn't about having the best technology. It was about using whatever you had in ways that nobody expected, and somewhere in the depths of space, coalition commanders were beginning to realize that they had seriously underestimated the species from the small blue planet on the galaxy's outer rim.